Hey everyone, so I have another art piece that is technically kind of like an installation in my current art series that focuses on various mental illnesses. So today I'm going to talk about this piece, which is a visual representation of narcolepsy in 3 different segments. The 3 different segments that I'm gonna break this down into is first, understanding this disorder. Second is why I decided to choose narcolepsy. And third is the creation or birthing process of this monster. So some of the things that you kind of have to understand about narcolepsy is that it's a neurological disorder. Technically it is certain neurons in your brain, like the receptors, don't create enough of a specific chemical in your brain. So this can actually cause you to have really wonky sleep cycles, which is pretty much what narcolepsy is all about. So your sleep cycle can change from wakefulness and sleepiness, like your brain itself, not necessarily your physical body. So your brain can jump from being awake to being in a subconscious, sleeping-like state, and it can happen at random points in time. Your sleep schedule, when you don't have narcolepsy, is very consistent. You have consistent consecutive hours of wakefulness, and then it jumps to your nighttime sleeping schedule where you're sleeping and then you hit REM sleep and then back to that kind of lighter sleep, and then you wake up and you're in your wakeful cycle again. But with narcolepsy, it really is random. So you could be fully awake in the middle of your day and suddenly drop into REM sleep. And so you're not necessarily sleeping, it's almost like a daydream, and you actually end up having hallucinations because of this. So it's like your dream is happening before your very eyes. So that can be really, really stressful and really problematic with narcolepsy, especially those who are still in school or when you're working, so on and so forth. Another symptom of narcolepsy that not all people with narcolepsy have is when your muscles kind of almost give out, in a sense. So a lot of people will see those videos of people with narcolepsy who will suddenly fall because they're falling asleep, in a sense. That doesn't actually happen to everyone with narcolepsy, but it is a concern if you do have it, and you have to be very careful about when it'll happen. You know, you have to really make sure that you're on top of your sleep schedule and stuff like that, and understanding how your brain is kind of working. So because of that, the treatments are kind of tricky. Obviously they'll probably do sleep cycles and stuff like that during the diagnostic period, but treatment is very heavily focused on understanding your own mind, how, you know, your mind is working in the cycles that it's going through, so on and so forth. You have to really limit your screen time, so you have to be really careful about the lights from phones, computers, and TVs, because, as we all know, that can actually affect your sleep cycle. So for those with narcolepsy, it can actually cause a lot of problems and make things very difficult. So those with narcolepsy, a lot of people have to have a specific amount of hours that they can go onto the phone or watch TV or be on the computer. And a lot of times it's very limited so that they can really maintain and try to keep a consistent schedule. So that's just a little bit of the understanding aspect of narcolepsy. So next I'm going to talk about why I decided to choose narcolepsy in this art series that I'm currently working on. One of the biggest reasons that I chose narcolepsy is because I feel like many people misunderstand narcolepsy. as I had mentioned earlier, a lot of times people will see the videos of people suddenly falling and essentially falling asleep, and people automatically think of that when they think of narcolepsy. But that's not all of what narcolepsy is, as I had just mentioned. A lot of times people don't actually have that relaxation of muscle when they're, not everyone has that. So you can't necessarily associate that with narcolepsy every time you think about it. It's better to think of it as a very inconsistent and very weird sleep cycle with hallucinations. Granted, I'm sure not all of the people with narcolepsy have frequent hallucinations as others, but it's something that would be fairly consistent in the diagnostic of narcolepsy. So I had also known very minimal amount about narcolepsy, and obviously this video and me talking right now isn't going to touch base on all of the information about narcolepsy. It's just barely scratching the surface. With all mental disorders and illnesses, it is very much in depth. So I try to just kind of cover the basics for people to understand a basic knowledge of it, more so than the typical societal stigma of these disorders. So I also wanted to understand narcolepsy on a very deep level so that I could understand it and be able to explain it to other people and create a visual representation of it. I have also known someone in my life who has been impacted by narcolepsy, and for the longest time I didn't necessarily understand what that meant and how it affected this person's life, so I wanted to understand and learn about narcolepsy more so that I could understand this person's life more and, understand why they do the things that they do and stuff like that, be able to understand how they go through life, the things that they struggle with every single day. So that's just, the general points about why I chose narcolepsy. So next I'm going to talk about the birthing process of the monster, or in other words, how I created this piece. So I started off by brainstorming, and I really wanted to incorporate the wonky sleep schedule and the hallucination aspects of this mental disorder. Because the muscle relaxation aspect of narcolepsy isn't something that's consistent with every single case, I decided that I didn't want to incorporate it and focus more heavily on the aspects that are more frequent with narcolepsy and that are more consistent in the diagnosis of those with narcolepsy. So I wanted to kind of personify those as items that this monster uses and manipulates to change the way that a person lives and sees things. So I decided to use an hourglass to represent the kind of wonky sleep schedule so that this monster can flip that hourglass whenever he wants at random and almost inconsistent. It's completely random, and I really felt that would kind of represent the sleep cycle and how it's difficult to kind of understand your own sleep cycle when you have narcolepsy. And I call it a sleep cycle, but it's also like a sleep and awake cycle in a sense. So I also wanted to represent the hallucinations, and at first I was kind of unsure how I wanted to represent that in a piece as a monster affecting a person. And then I thought about opera glasses. They're essentially this item that I used is things that people would use while sitting on a balcony in a theater, and they're basically like mini binoculars that when you look through, it magnifies the stage so that you can see it more clearly and see it closer. So I felt like this would be an excellent item to use because they're almost like glasses on a stick for this monster to hold in front of a person to affect the way that they see the world. And this is how I wanted to represent the hallucination aspect of narcolepsy. And honestly, both the hourglass and the opera glasses I feel were really great representations, and they came out just the way that I wanted them to. This monster I also wanted to be a little bit different. So some of my monsters are very innocent, they don't realize that they're affecting the person. Some of the other ones are affecting the person almost as if it's their only way, such as my kleptomania monster, which is technically like a parasitic monster. It feeds off of the human and almost as if it doesn't know that it's doing anything wrong. Like, it doesn't have that thought process. I've also created monsters that I like to consider kind of like trickster monsters, where they're these little trickster little creatures that are intentionally doing this just to be, just to get their own sense of fun and adventure. And I felt like this monster would be a great trickster monster. So that leads me to the color choices. In the past, a lot of my monsters that have been more of a malicious intent, like the trickster monsters and the kleptomania monsters, have been green tones, and I didn't even realize this until I was thinking about the color choices of this piece. So I decided that I was going to create this monster and have him be green, and I think it's mostly because I was tying it and connecting it with these other trickster monsters, just to kind of give the audience a better idea of how to connect them to each other and understand which monsters are kind of, these trickster creatures that are doing it for their own fun, and differentiating those from the monsters that are doing it because they just don't realize that they're doing anything wrong. I also wanted to use a lot of blues and purples to represent day and night. I didn't want to use black to represent night because I felt like it might give the wrong idea. I didn't want it to be a representation or misinterpretation, I should say, of, sadness or depression or like an overwhelming darkness kind of feel. I really wanted it to represent the night and how the night isn't necessarily an evil feeling, even though it is dark. So I felt like purple would be a good representation of the nighttime, because purple is a very, dark, cooler tone, but it's also a tone that's a little bit more inviting than black. And then, obviously, blue I wanted to use for daytime because the blue sky, that one's kind of a given. I don't really need to explain that too much. So I wanted to incorporate those in not only the background as if they're kind of mixing and merging together to create this weird, wonky, surreal background of a world that you're surrounded by, but also on the hourglass, so that you could kind of get the idea of blue representing day and purple representing night. I also decided to make the lenses of the opera glasses purple to kind of give a hint that they're kind of another tool for him to use. So it's more of like an item that gives the idea that it's not just a pair of glasses. It kind of ties in with the other elements of the purples. So I think that's about it in terms of understanding narcolepsy and why I decided to choose this piece and the entire creation process of this monster. I thank you all so much for watching this video. I cannot stress enough how amazing it is that there are people out there willing to learn about these mental disorders and mental illnesses and are truly interested in the videos of me creating these monsters of representations of these disorders and illnesses. It's truly incredible. And I do it because it's important to remember that you are not your mental illness. You are not the one that is creating these thoughts or doing these things. There is something in your brain, whether it is a, lack of chemical in your brain or whatever it may be. It's not necessarily you as a person that is causing this to happen. It's something else going on in your brain that you cannot control. So I like to represent those as monsters, as if, that chemical imbalance in your brain is actually just this little monster running around in your head, affecting the way that you live. I want people to understand how important that is, It's very important to understand that you're not your mental illness. You are your own person. And it's important to learn about these mental illnesses and disorders so that we can help our friends and family who are diagnosed by understanding the way that their mind works better, to be able to help them as best as we can. So again, I thank you guys so much for being interested in learning about this monster and about narcolepsy in general. There will be prints available of this monster in my shop if you're interested. There should be a link in the description. If you're interested in seeing any other videos that I've made, I've also recorded some of my other monsters in the past. Feel free to go check that out. If you have any suggestions of other monsters that you might be interested in having me create, feel free to leave it in a comment below. Although this art series that I'm doing has technically only been a 12-piece, 12-month project, I have been considering expanding it and focusing on other disorders and illnesses, just without putting a deadline and strict schedule like I did with the first 12. So if you're interested in seeing any other monsters, please let me know in the comments below so that I can get some more ideas of what you guys want to see. If you happen to suggest something that I have already created, I will definitely link you to the images of that piece and the write-up blurb of pretty much what this video is talking about, but in written format for those pieces. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share it with your friends and family for spreading the awareness and the knowledge of narcolepsy and mental illness. If you like what you see and you want to keep seeing more from me, feel free to hit that subscribe button, and I post new videos every Friday. See you guys next week.